For 12 years, Zara Nightingale poured coffee for Air Force generals who never suspected that the quiet woman behind the counter had once eliminated high-value targets from 7,000 miles away. What they didn't know was that this unassuming cafe worker held one of the military's most classified operational records, 147 confirmed drone strikes that had changed the course of modern warfare. When a crisis erupted that demanded her exact expertise, the invisible expert would finally step out of the shadows. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist clung to Ironwood Air Force Base like a protective shroud as Zara Nightingale turned the key to Compass Rose Café at exactly 0500 hours. At 45, she moved with the deliberate precision of someone who understood that timing could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure, though the airmen grabbing their morning coffee had no idea she thought in such terms. Her calloused hands, weathered from years of handling industrial coffee equipment, bore no trace of the thousands of hours they had once spent guiding predator drones across hostile airspace. The wedding ring she wore belonged to a marriage that had ended 8 years ago, but she kept it as a reminder of the life she'd left behind when her classified clearance was revoked and her military career vanished overnight. The cafe itself was a study in functional simplicity. 24 tables arranged with military precision, each positioned to maximize traffic flow and conversation. The walls displayed generic Air Force photography, jets in formation, patriotic eagles, inspirational quotes about service and sacrifice. Nothing that would suggest the woman who ran this place had once sat in underground bunkers, making split-second decisions that ended human lives in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Yemen. But those who observed closely might notice peculiarities in Zara's behavior that didn't quite fit the profile of a typical food service worker. The way she instinctively glanced at the digital weather display every few minutes, calculating wind patterns and visibility conditions with the automatic assessment of someone trained to factor atmospheric data into precision targeting. How she positioned herself behind the counter to maintain clear sightlines to all entrances, exit routes, and the flight operations center visible through the eastern windows. Most telling was her unconscious habit of tracking aircraft movements across the base. Her eyes would follow the path of incoming helicopters with the focused attention of someone calculating approach vectors, payload weights, and optimal landing configurations. She monitored radio chatter from the flight tower with the passive intensity of someone whose survival had once depended on understanding communication protocols and operational tempo. Lieutenant Ryan Chambers approached the counter at precisely 0630, as he had every weekday for the past 3 years. 26 years old, fresh-faced, carrying himself with the confident stride of someone who believed his current assignment as a drone operator made him part of the military's technological elite. His flight suit bore the wings and lightning bolt insignia of the 432nd Wing, Remote Piloted Operations. "Morning, Zara," he said with the casual friendliness of someone who had never questioned why the cafe manager seemed to know more about military operations than most civilians. "Usual setup today?" Zara had his order memorized. Large dark roast, 2 sugars, temperature maintained at exactly 145 degrees Fahrenheit. But what Chambers didn't realize was that she also knew his operational schedule, his mission rotation patterns, and the fact that his current assignment involved providing surveillance support for ground operations in Syria. "Busy night ahead?" she asked, handing him the perfectly prepared coffee while her peripheral vision tracked the unusual activity around the drone operations complex. More personnel than normal, vehicles arriving earlier than standard shift changes, the subtle indicators of elevated operational tempo that most people wouldn't recognize. Chambers shrugged with the practiced nonchalance of someone bound by classification restrictions. "You know how it is. Can't really talk specifics, but yeah, things are picking up in our sector." Zara nodded with apparent disinterest, but her mind was already analyzing the implications. Increased drone activity typically precedes major ground operations. The timing suggested coordination with overseas military actions, probably involving high-value target elimination or time-sensitive intelligence gathering. the kind of missions she had once executed with precision that earned her the unofficial title of the Ghost among intelligence communities. General Victoria Blackwood entered the cafe at 0645, her entrance commanding immediate attention from every person in uniform. 58 years old, decorated veteran of 3 combat deployments, currently overseeing the largest drone operations center in the continental United States. Her bearing reflected 35 years of military leadership, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who made decisions that affected global security.
Zara prepared the general's order without being asked. Black coffee, single origin Ethiopian, served at exactly 160 degrees in a ceramic mug rather than paper cup. It was a ritual they had maintained for 4 years, though their conversations never progressed beyond professional pleasantries. "Good morning, General," Zara said, extending the coffee with the respectful deference appropriate for someone addressing superior rank, despite her civilian status. "Morning, Zara. Appreciate the consistency," Blackwood replied, accepting the coffee with the brief smile of someone who valued reliable service in an unpredictable profession. But as the general turned toward her usual corner table, Zara noticed something that would have escaped civilian observation. Blackwood's left hand bore a slight tremor, barely perceptible, but consistent with the stress indicators Zara had learned to recognize in high-pressure operational environments. Combined with the increased activity around the drone complex, it suggested the kind of developing crisis that required immediate response capabilities. Colonel James Hartwell joined the general's table at 0700, carrying himself with the urgent purposefulness of someone delivering critical information. Zara continued her morning routine, preparing orders, maintaining equipment, serving customers, while her trained senses absorbed fragments of conversation that painted an increasingly troubling picture. Satellite intelligence confirms the convoy movement. 12-hour window before they reach the extraction point. Current operators lack the experience for this kind of precision targeting. The words reached Zara's consciousness like echoes from a previous life, triggering muscle memory and tactical analysis that had been dormant for over a decade. She understood immediately that they were discussing a high-stakes drone operation requiring expertise that exceeded their current personnel capabilities. Technical Sergeant Nova Pierce approached the counter, her expression reflecting the controlled stress of someone dealing with equipment failures under time pressure. Pierce managed the maintenance operations for the base's drone fleet, responsible for ensuring that multi-million-dollar aircraft remained operational during critical missions. "Zara, you wouldn't happen to have any insight into weather patterns for the next few hours, would you?" Pierce asked, apparently grasping for any source of information that might help with her current challenges. The question was innocent enough, but it revealed the kind of operational pressure that Zara recognized from her own experience managing complex missions under impossible deadlines. Weather conditions affected drone performance in ways that required constant adjustment and real-time decision-making. Winds are shifting from the southwest, should stabilize around 15 knots by 10h hours. Visibility will remain clear, but thermal conditions might create turbulence between 2,000 and 5,000 feet. Zara replied, drawing on meteorological analysis skills that she'd maintained through years of personal study. Pierce stared at Zara with the expression of someone hearing technical accuracy that exceeded expected civilian knowledge. "That's remarkably specific. Do you follow aviation weather pretty closely?" Zara's smile carried the practiced deflection of someone who had learned to avoid questions that led toward classified territory. "Just like to stay informed about conditions that might affect base operations." What she didn't mention was that she maintained subscriptions to military-grade weather services, monitored atmospheric data with the same intensity she had once applied to mission planning, and possessed an intuitive understanding of how environmental factors affected drone performance that came from executing hundreds of precision strikes under varying conditions. The morning progressed with its familiar rhythm, but Zara's attention remained focused on the developing crisis that was clearly stretching the base's operational capabilities beyond their current expertise. She watched experienced personnel struggle with challenges that she could have resolved with the kind of tactical precision that had once made her indispensable to military operations. As she cleaned equipment and prepared for the lunch rush, Zara found herself calculating targeting solutions and operational parameters with the automatic mental processes that 12 years of civilian life hadn't been able to eliminate. The invisible expert was still there, hidden beneath the surface of ordinary service, waiting for the moment when her skills might again be needed to save lives and serve her country.
The lunch rush at Compass Rose Café typically brought a steady stream of personnel from across Ironwood Air Force Base, but today carried an undercurrent of tension that Zara read like a tactical briefing. Officers clustered in hushed conversations, their body language reflecting the controlled urgency of people managing a developing crisis. Support staff moved with the heightened efficiency that accompanied elevated operational tempo. Even the civilian contractors seemed to sense that something significant was unfolding. Captain Olivia Kane entered the cafe at 12:30 hours, her intelligence officer credentials evident in the way she automatically scanned the room before approaching the counter. 34 years old, sharp-eyed, carrying herself with the confident precision of someone who had earned respect in a field dominated by classified information and life-or-death decision-making. Her uniform bore the distinctive lightning bolt and globe insignia of Air Force intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. "Afternoon, Sarah," Kane said, her tone carrying the polite professionalism of someone who had learned to compartmentalize stress. "Could I get a double espresso? Going to be a long day." Zara prepared the order with her usual efficiency, but she noticed details that revealed more about Kane's current situation than casual conversation ever would. The slight smudge of ink on her right index finger suggested hours of reviewing paper documents rather than digital files, typically classified materials that couldn't be accessed through standard computer networks. Her left temple showed the faint impression of prolonged headphone use, indicating extended monitoring of audio intelligence feeds. "Challenging operational requirements?" Zara asked while adjusting the espresso machine with the precise movements of someone who understood that attention to detail mattered in any context. Kane paused, struck by the specificity of Zara's question. Most civilians would ask about being busy or working late, but Zara had used terminology that suggested familiarity with military operational structure. Something like that. Complex targeting parameters that require more precision than our current protocols typically handle. The conversation was interrupted by Master Sergeant Kai Jensen, approaching the counter with the purposeful stride of someone seeking specific information. Jensen managed logistics coordination for drone operations, responsible for ensuring that equipment, personnel, and intelligence flowed seamlessly during critical missions. His expression reflected the controlled frustration of someone dealing with resource limitations during time-sensitive operations. "Zara, you wouldn't happen to know anything about communication protocols for coordinating with overseas ground units, would you?" Jensen asked, apparently grasping for any source of insight that might help with his current challenges. The question surprised Kane, who turned to observe Zara's response with the professional curiosity of someone trained to recognize unusual knowledge patterns. Most food service personnel wouldn't be expected to understand military communication procedures, particularly those involving international coordination. Zara paused in her coffee preparation, considering how to respond without revealing capabilities that might raise uncomfortable questions about her background. "Different time zones require careful synchronization," she said carefully. "Protocol timing becomes critical when you're coordinating real-time operations across multiple theaters." Jensen stared at Zara with growing amazement. "That's exactly the issue we're dealing with. How did you know that timing synchronization was the primary challenge?" "Common sense," Zara replied with the deflective smile she had perfected over 12 years of avoiding questions about her apparent familiarity with military operations. "When you're serving food here, you pick up on operational rhythms and communication patterns." But Kane was studying Zara with the analytical intensity of someone trained to identify anomalies in human behavior. The cafe manager's responses demonstrated understanding that exceeded casual observation. Her terminology reflected familiarity with operational procedures that civilians shouldn't comprehend. Most significantly, her suggestions addressed precisely the challenges that classified intelligence operations were currently facing.
Zara, your insight into operational coordination seems remarkably sophisticated for someone whose primary experience is food service. Have you had any background in military logistics or communication protocols? The question hung in the air, like a precision-guided munition seeking its target. Zara felt the familiar weight of concealed identity pressing against her carefully maintained anonymity. For 12 years, she had successfully deflected similar inquiries, but Kane's intelligence training made her more perceptive than most personnel. "I've been around military operations for a long time," Zara replied, choosing her words with the care of someone navigating classified territory. "You absorb certain perspectives when you're embedded in this environment." Lieutenant Chambers returned to the cafe at 1400 hours, his expression reflecting the stress of someone struggling with technical challenges that exceeded his current expertise. He approached the counter with the hesitant demeanor of someone seeking guidance from an unexpected source. "Zara," he began carefully, "hypothetically speaking, if someone needed to execute a precision strike in an urban environment with minimal collateral damage, what factors would be most critical for success?" The question violated multiple classification protocols, but Chambers' desperation was evident. Kane's attention sharpened, recognizing that a junior officer was essentially asking a civilian for tactical guidance on lethal military operations. Zara's response emerged from years of experience that she had thought buried forever. Environmental factors would be primary: wind speed and direction, atmospheric density, thermal conditions that affect projectile trajectory. Target identification requires multiple confirmation sources to ensure accurate discrimination between hostile and civilian personnel. Timing coordination with ground units becomes essential to minimize exposure windows. The silence that followed was profound. Kane, Jensen, and Chambers stared at Zara with expressions that cycled through amazement, confusion, and dawning recognition that the woman behind the coffee counter possessed expertise that exceeded their own training. "Ma'am," Chambers said quietly, "that analysis is more sophisticated than what we learned in advanced tactical training. Where did you acquire that level of understanding about precision targeting?" Zara realized she had crossed a line that 12 years of careful concealment had been designed to avoid. Her response had revealed knowledge that couldn't be explained by casual observation or food service experience. The invisible expert had become momentarily visible, and there was no way to retreat without raising additional questions. "Military operations involve complex considerations," she said, attempting to deflect while recognizing that her credibility was now permanently altered. "When you've been around these environments long enough, you develop appreciation for the challenges involved." But Kane was studying Zara with the focused intensity of someone whose intelligence training had identified a significant anomaly. The cafe manager's responses demonstrated operational knowledge that suggested direct experience rather than casual observation. Her terminology, analytical framework, and tactical understanding exceeded anything that civilian exposure could provide. "Zara," Kane said with the careful precision of someone probing for classified information, "your familiarity with targeting protocols and operational coordination suggests background that goes beyond food service. Are you certain you haven't had any direct involvement in military operations?" The question represented exactly the kind of scrutiny that Zara had spent 12 years avoiding. Her carefully constructed civilian identity was beginning to crack under the weight of expertise that couldn't remain hidden when lives were at stake, and her knowledge could make the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. As the afternoon progressed, more personnel began seeking Zara's input on challenges that revealed the growing crisis facing Ironwood Air Force Base. Her responses continued to demonstrate understanding that exceeded civilian knowledge, creating a pattern of competence that could no longer be dismissed as coincidental observation. The invisible expert was becoming visible, whether she wanted it or not.
The emergency alarm system at Ironwood Air Force Base pierced the afternoon quiet at 15:47 hours, its urgent wail immediately transforming the cafe's casual atmosphere into controlled chaos. Personnel abandoned their coffee and conversations, moving with the disciplined urgency of people trained to respond to crisis situations. Zara watched the rapid deployment unfold through the cafe windows, her experienced eye automatically cataloging the signs of a developing emergency that would test the base's operational capabilities. General Blackwood burst through the cafe doors at 15:52, her commanding presence immediately drawing attention from every person in uniform. Her expression reflected the controlled intensity of someone managing a situation that required immediate decision-making under extreme pressure. Behind her followed Colonel Hartwell and Captain Kane, their faces bearing the grim determination of people confronting challenges that pushed their resources beyond normal limits. "Clear the main dining area," Blackwood commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to instant compliance. "We're establishing a crisis coordination center. All non-essential personnel, report to your units immediately." Zara began securing the cafe equipment with efficient movements, but her attention remained focused on the rapid transformation of her workspace into a military command center. Maps appeared on tables, communication equipment materialized from transport cases, and personnel began establishing the kind of real-time intelligence operation that she recognized from her own experience managing complex tactical situations. The first briefing revealed the scope of the crisis. A terrorist cell had captured 37 American civilians during a coordinated attack on a medical facility in a remote region of Somalia. Intelligence sources confirmed that the hostages were being held in a fortified compound surrounded by dense urban population, creating a scenario where conventional rescue operations would result in massive civilian casualties. Time-sensitive intelligence indicates the hostages will be moved to a secondary location in approximately 8 hours, Colonel Hartwell reported, his voice reflecting the weight of information that carried life or death implications. Once they're relocated, tracking becomes exponentially more difficult and rescue probability drops to near zero. Zara continued serving coffee to the coordination team, but her mind was already analyzing the tactical challenges that conventional military planning couldn't adequately address. Urban precision targeting with hostage considerations was among the most complex operations in modern warfare, requiring experience that most military personnel never developed. It was specialized expertise that separated competent operators from exceptional ones. Master Sergeant Jensen approached the general with communication equipment that crackled with urgent transmissions from Washington. "Ma'am, Pentagon is requesting immediate operational assessment. They need confirmation of our capability to execute rescue operations within the available time window." The pressure in the room intensified as personnel realized they were facing a mission that required capabilities their current team couldn't provide. Lives were hanging on the balance, international implications were enormous, and time was running out with no viable solutions emerging from conventional military planning.
"What about Captain Morrison from Nellis?" Hartwell suggested, referring to the Air Force's most experienced drone operator. "He's handled complex urban operations before." "Food poisoning," Pierce replied grimly, "along with Major Stevens and Lieutenant Colonel Davis. Half our most experienced operators are down with the same illness from that new restaurant downtown." General Blackwood's expression reflected the frustration of a commander facing impossible choices with inadequate resources. The mission required expertise that was simply unavailable within their current personnel structure, but abandoning the hostages wasn't an acceptable option. Zara moved among the organized chaos, refilling coffee cups while absorbing operational details that painted an increasingly desperate picture. She understood the tactical challenges they were discussing in ways that her years of cafe service had never revealed. The environmental factors, the precision requirements, the hostage considerations. These weren't abstract concepts to her, but practical challenges she had managed successfully dozens of times. "Ma'am," Kane said quietly, reviewing intelligence updates that continued to worsen their situation, "latest reports indicate the terrorist cell has anti-aircraft capabilities. Any rescue operation will face additional defensive measures that weren't present in our initial assessment." The new information added another layer of complexity to an already impossible mission.
Anti-aircraft defenses meant that rescue helicopters couldn't approach safely, ground assault remained unfeasible, and precision drone operations became the only viable option for reaching the hostages before they disappeared forever. Captain Torres from Intelligence Coordination approached with updated satellite feeds that showed movement around the compound. General, thermal imaging indicates the hostages are being prepared for transport. We're looking at maybe 6 hours before they're moved to an unknown location. The timeline was compressing, options were disappearing, and conventional military capabilities were proving inadequate for the challenges they faced. Zara watched the crisis unfold with the growing recognition that she possessed exactly the expertise that could save 37 American lives. But revealing her capabilities would mean abandoning the safe anonymity she had maintained for 12 years. It would mean acknowledging a past that medical regulations and political circumstances had forced her to leave behind. It would mean accepting responsibility for lives that would depend on skills she hadn't used professionally in over a decade.
The situation deteriorated rapidly as evening approached Ironwood Air Force Base. Intelligence updates streaming into the makeshift command center painted an increasingly desperate picture that tested every resource the military could deploy. Zara continued serving coffee to the crisis coordination team, but her attention remained laser-focused on developments that revealed just how inadequate conventional capabilities were for the challenges they faced. At 17:30 hours, fresh satellite imagery arrived that transformed an already complex mission into something approaching the impossible. The terrorist cell had moved the hostages to the building's upper floors, positioning them near windows where any precision strike would risk civilian casualties. Anti-aircraft systems had been reinforced with additional personnel, and intelligence sources reported that explosive devices were being prepared for hostage elimination if rescue operations were detected. "The window is closing faster than projected," Captain Kane announced, her voice carrying the controlled tension of someone delivering information that could determine whether 37 people lived or died. Latest intelligence suggests hostage relocation has been moved up to 2,100 hours. We're looking at 3.5 hours, not 8. General Blackwood studied the updated tactical requirements with the expression of a commander watching viable options disappear one by one. The compressed timeline eliminated any possibility of deploying specialized personnel from other installations. Conventional rescue protocols couldn't address the urban complexity, and their current drone operators lacked experience with the surgical precision that hostage situations demanded. "What about unmanned reconnaissance?" Colonel Hartwell suggested, grasping for alternatives that might provide additional intelligence-gathering capability. "Can we at least get real-time assessment of hostage locations and terrorist positions?" Technical Sergeant Pierce reviewed the available equipment with the systematic thoroughness of someone who understood that equipment limitations could doom even the most carefully planned operations. "Sir, our current surveillance drones can provide general imagery, but the resolution isn't sufficient for target discrimination in close-quarters hostage scenarios. We'd be operating essentially blind for any precision targeting requirements." The technical challenges were compounding into an operational nightmare that exceeded the base's current capabilities. Zara listened to the detailed discussions while her mind automatically processed solutions that her years of classified experience had taught her to recognize. She understood the equipment limitations they were describing, but she also knew modification techniques that could enhance targeting precision beyond standard parameters. Lieutenant Chambers approached General Blackwood with communication equipment that carried urgent transmissions from the Pentagon. His expression reflected the weight of pressure flowing down from the highest levels of military command. "Ma'am, Washington is requesting immediate confirmation of our operational readiness. They need assessment of success probability for hostage rescue within available timeframe." The question demanded honesty that military personnel were trained to provide, regardless of personal consequences. Blackwood's response reflected years of experience making decisions where lives depended on accurate capability assessment rather than optimistic projections. "Based on current resources and personnel expertise," she said carefully, "success probability for hostage rescue without civilian casualties is approximately 15%. Probability of successful hostage extraction with acceptable collateral damage rises to perhaps 30%. The numbers hung in the air like a death sentence for people whose only crime was providing medical assistance in one of the world's most dangerous regions. 37 Americans whose families were probably watching news coverage,
hoping for military rescue that conventional capabilities couldn't provide with acceptable risk parameters. Zara felt something stirring in her chest that she had thought buried forever, the combination of professional analysis and moral imperative that had once driven her to accept missions that other operators considered too dangerous or complex. The rational part of her mind cataloged the challenges: compressed timeline, urban environment, hostage considerations, anti-aircraft defenses, equipment limitations that required creative modification. But beneath the rational analysis, something else was awakening. The part of her that had earned recognition as the ghost by successfully executing precision strikes that other operators said were impossible. The expertise that had made her indispensable until medical regulations and political circumstances had forced her into civilian anonymity. Master Sergeant Jensen approached with intelligence updates that revealed additional complications threatening the already marginal success probability. General, latest reports indicate the terrorist cell has acquired surface-to-air missiles. Any aircraft approach within 2 kilometers faces significant defensive threats.
The new information eliminated even the limited rescue options that conventional military planning had been considering. Helicopter insertion was now impossible, ground assault remained unfeasible due to terrain and timeline constraints, and precision drone operations would require capabilities that exceeded standard military protocols. What about coordinating with international forces? Hartwell asked, exploring alternatives that might provide resources unavailable through American military channels. British or French special operations units might have different capability sets. Negative, Kane replied, after reviewing diplomatic communication channels. International coordination would require minimum 48 hours for operational approval and deployment. The hostages will be long gone before any external assistance could reach the operational area. As the crisis meeting continued, Zara recognized that she was watching experienced military personnel confront the limits of conventional warfare when faced with challenges that required specialized expertise developed through years of classified operations. The tactical requirements were complex, the environmental factors were demanding, and the precision necessary for success exceeded what standard training could provide. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The weight of knowledge pressed against Zara's conscience like atmospheric pressure before a storm. She possessed exactly the expertise that could transform an impossible mission into a challenging but achievable operation. Her experience with urban precision targeting, equipment modification, and hostage consideration protocols could provide the capabilities that conventional military resources couldn't deliver. But stepping forward would mean revealing a past that she had spent 12 years carefully concealing. It would mean acknowledging skills that medical disqualification had officially stripped from her, accepting responsibility for lives that would depend on capabilities she hadn't used professionally in over a decade. The moral calculation was becoming impossible to ignore. 37 American civilians whose rescue depended on expertise that was sitting unrecognized behind a coffee counter, while military personnel struggled with limitations that she could address. Children who needed to return to their families, medical workers whose humanitarian mission had placed them in mortal danger, people whose survival might depend on whether she was willing to risk everything to help them. As 1800 hours approached and the timeline continued compressing, Zara found herself standing at a crossroads that would define not just the next few hours, but the rest of her life. The invisible expert could remain hidden, safe in the anonymity that had protected her for 12 years. Or she could step into the light and accept the consequences of being who she really was.
At 1847 hours, as the command center buzzed with increasingly desperate attempts to find viable solutions, Zara Nightingale made a decision that would shatter 12 years of carefully constructed anonymity. She walked away from the coffee station, removed her apron with deliberate precision, and approached General Blackwood's tactical planning table
with the steady determination of someone who had decided that 37 lives mattered more than personal safety. The conversations around the table ceased as personnel noticed the cafe manager approaching their classified operational planning session. Military protocol typically restricted civilian access to sensitive discussions, but the urgency of their situation had blurred normal security boundaries. General Blackwood looked up from satellite imagery with the polite but firm expression of someone prepared to redirect unauthorized personnel. "General Blackwood," Zara said, her voice carrying a quiet authority that hadn't been present during 12 years of serving coffee. "I can execute this mission." The silence that followed was profound enough to hear individual heartbeats. Every person in the command center turned to stare at Zara with expressions that cycled through confusion, disbelief, and growing amazement as they tried to process information that didn't fit any familiar category. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" General Blackwood asked carefully, her tone reflecting the controlled patience of someone accustomed to managing unexpected developments during crisis situations. Zara reached into her uniform pocket and produced a military identification card that had been hidden there for over 12 years. The document bore her photograph alongside credentials that made every person in the room recalculate everything they thought they knew about the woman who had been serving their coffee. Staff Sergeant Zara Nightingale, 432nd Wing, remotely piloted aircraft operations, she said simply, extending the identification for inspection. Classified service record, 2009 to 2012. 147 confirmed precision strikes, specialized training in urban hostage rescue operations, and surgical targeting protocols. General Blackwood took the identification and examined it with the thoroughness of someone who understood that lives depended on accurate information. Her expression shifted from skepticism to amazement as she processed credentials that documented exactly the expertise their mission required. These records indicate qualification on advanced MQ-9 Reaper systems with specialized modifications for precision targeting, she said slowly, looking up at Zara with growing comprehension. Urban environment certification, hostage extraction protocols, anti-aircraft evasion techniques. You're telling me you've been serving coffee here for 12 years and you're qualified to execute the most challenging mission we're facing? Captain Kane stepped forward, her intelligence training immediately recognizing the significance of what they were witnessing. "Ma'am, Staff Sergeant Nightingale's identification shows clearance levels that were reserved for the military's most sensitive operations. If these credentials are authentic, she has experience that exceeds anything our current personnel can provide." Zara met their stares with the steady confidence that had once earned her recognition as one of the military's most trusted precision strike specialists. "General, I've executed missions in urban environments where the margin for error was measured in inches, not feet. I've eliminated high-value targets while preserving civilian populations in adjacent buildings. I've successfully completed hostage extraction operations when conventional military protocols said success was impossible." The transformation was complete and undeniable. The invisible cafe worker had become Staff Sergeant Zara Nightingale, and 37 American lives were depending on whether her claims could be verified and her skills could be trusted after 12 years of civilian service. Colonel Hartwell, who had been reviewing Zara's credentials over General Blackwood's shoulder, spoke with the amazement of someone witnessing the impossible. "Staff Sergeant, your record shows completion of operations that I've read about in classified briefings. The precision strikes in Yemen, the hostage extraction in Afghanistan, the surgical elimination of terrorist leadership in Pakistan. Those were your missions?" "Affirmative, sir," Zara replied, her military bearing returning like muscle memory that had been dormant but never forgotten. "I specialized in operations that conventional protocols couldn't address. Surgical targeting, minimal collateral damage, hostage preservation in complex urban environments. Technical Sergeant Pierce approached with the practical perspective of someone who understood that claims needed to be backed by demonstrable capability. Staff Sergeant, the equipment modifications required for this type of precision targeting, can you still configure systems for surgical accuracy?
Zara's response emerged from years of experience that civilian life hadn't been able to eliminate. Sergeant, I can modify targeting systems for surgical precision that exceeds standard military parameters. I maintained currency on equipment specifications, tactical procedures, and environmental calculation protocols. The principles remain constant even if the technology has advanced. Master Sergeant Jensen, who had been listening to the exchange with growing excitement, stepped forward with the recognition of someone understanding that their impossible situation might have just become achievable. Staff Sergeant, if you can really do what your record indicates, why did you leave active duty? These credentials show the kind of expertise that the military desperately needs. The question touched on territory that Zara had spent 12 years avoiding, but the current crisis demanded honesty regardless of personal consequences. Medical disqualification, she said simply. Type 1 diabetes diagnosis resulted in immediate removal from active duty status. Military medical regulations prohibited continued service in precision targeting roles, regardless of demonstrated capability or mission effectiveness. General Blackwood felt the weight of command decision pressing down on her like atmospheric pressure. The legal implications of reinstating a medically disqualified service member were significant, but the moral implications of abandoning 37 Americans were overwhelming. She glanced at the tactical requirements that had defeated their conventional capabilities, then back at Zara's credentials that documented exactly the experience their mission required. Staff Sergeant, she said carefully, medical disqualification typically means permanent separation from active duty status. What authority would allow your participation in current operations? Zara's response reflected years of studying military regulations that had ended her career. Emergency authority provisions allow commanders to waive medical restrictions when civilian lives are at stake and no alternatives exist. You have the discretionary power to authorize temporary active duty status for crisis response operations. The command center had become completely silent as personnel recognized they were witnessing a moment that would determine whether an impossible mission might become achievable. 37 lives hanging in the balance, conventional military capabilities proven inadequate, and a hidden expert emerging from 12 years of anonymity to offer exactly the expertise that success required. General Blackwood made her decision with the swift certainty of a commander who understood that hesitation killed people and second-guessing destroyed missions. Staff Sergeant Nightingale, I'm authorizing emergency reinstatement under crisis response provisions. Can you be ready to execute this mission in 60 minutes? Zara felt something unlock in her chest, a sense of purpose that had been dormant for over 12 years, the recognition that her skills were finally needed again, and the knowledge that 37 American lives were about to depend on whether the Ghost could live up to her legendary reputation. What followed was the most intensive operational briefing in Ironwood Air Force Base history. Zara absorbed technical specifications, mission parameters, and intelligence updates with the focused intensity of someone whose muscle memory was already configured for the fundamental requirements of precision targeting. The 12-year gap since her last active mission dissolved like morning fog as she processed information that would determine whether 37 Americans lived or died. The equipment available exceeded what she had operated during her active duty years, but the basic principles of surgical drone warfare remained constant across all technological platforms. Advanced MQ-9 Reaper systems with enhanced targeting capabilities, real-time satellite intelligence feeds, and communication protocols that allowed coordinated operations across multiple time zones and operational theaters. Lieutenant Chambers, assigned as her technical support specialist, initially approached the situation with skepticism that dissolved rapidly as Zara demonstrated knowledge that exceeded his own training. Her understanding of targeting algorithms, environmental compensation calculations, and hostage preservation protocols reflected experience that classroom instruction could never provide. Staff Sergeant Chambers said as they reviewed satellite imagery of the target compound, "Your approach to urban precision targeting is unlike anything we learned in standard training. Where did you develop techniques for discrimination between hostiles and civilians in close-quarter scenarios?" Zara studied the thermal imaging that showed the building's internal structure, automatically calculating approach vectors and strike zones with mathematical precision that reflected years of making life-or-death decisions based on incomplete information. "Lieutenant, when you've executed precision strikes with American hostages held 30 meters from your target zone, you learn to trust advanced discrimination techniques and multiple confirmation protocols." Captain Kane approached with intelligence updates that revealed the complexity of their operational environment. The terrorist cell had positioned hostages strategically throughout the building, using them as human shields while maintaining defensive positions that covered all conventional approach routes. Any rescue operation would require surgical precision that left no margin for error. Staff Sergeant Nightingale, Kane said, spreading fresh reconnaissance imagery across the planning table. Latest intelligence shows the hostiles have divided the hostages into 3 groups, positioned on different floors. Simultaneous coordination would be required to prevent execution of any group if rescue operations are detected. Zara examined the building layout with the analytical intensity of someone whose decisions would determine whether precision targeting could achieve objectives that conventional military protocols couldn't address. The tactical challenges were complex, but they fell within parameters she had successfully managed during her classified service career. "Captain, we'll need coordinated strikes timed within a 15-second window," she said, her voice carrying the confident authority of someone who had executed similar operations under even more challenging conditions. "Primary targeting will eliminate hostile leadership, while secondary strikes neutralize defensive positions. Hostage extraction requires simultaneous breach operations coordinated with precision targeting." Technical Sergeant Pierce monitored the equipment modifications that Zara was implementing with growing amazement. The cafe manager was configuring targeting systems with expertise that exceeded specialized military training, implementing enhancements that Pierce had never seen in standard operational protocols. "Ma'am," Pierce said, watching Zara adjust targeting parameters with fluid precision of someone who understood equipment capabilities at an intuitive level, "these modifications exceed anything in our technical manuals. How did you develop enhancement techniques that our engineers haven't documented?" Zara's hands moved over the control systems with muscle memory that transcended the 12-year gap since her last operation. Each adjustment was calculated to optimize precision while maintaining operational security that would prevent hostile forces from detecting incoming strikes until impact was unavoidable. "Sergeant, classified operations require capabilities that standard protocols can't provide," she replied while calibrating environmental compensation algorithms that would account for wind, atmospheric density, and thermal conditions affecting projectile trajectory. "When American lives depend on surgical accuracy, you develop techniques that exceed conventional limitations." The transformation was remarkable to witness. The woman who had served coffee with quiet efficiency had become Staff Sergeant Nightingale, commanding respect through demonstrated expertise that exceeded anything the base personnel had encountered. Her operational planning reflected years of experience managing complex missions under impossible conditions. Master Sergeant Jensen coordinated communication protocols that would link the Drone Operations Center with ground forces, intelligence assets, and command authorities spanning multiple continents. The complexity of real-time coordination across different time zones and operational theaters required precision that Jensen had never attempted. "Staff Sergeant," Jensen said, reviewing communication timelines that would synchronize their operation with supporting elements worldwide. "The coordination requirements for this mission exceed anything in our standard protocols. Are you certain we can maintain operational security while managing this level of complexity?"
Zara's response reflected confidence earned through successful execution of missions that other operators had considered impossible. Sergeant, I've coordinated precision strikes with special operations forces in hostile territory while maintaining communication security that prevented compromise. This operation is complex, but achievable with proper planning and execution. As the mission briefing continued, personnel throughout the command center began to understand that they were working with someone whose expertise exceeded their own training by orders of magnitude. Zara's analysis of environmental factors, target discrimination protocols, and hostage preservation techniques reflected knowledge that could only come from years of classified operations. Colonel Hartwell, who had been monitoring the operational planning, approached with the expression of someone witnessing capabilities that standard military training couldn't provide. Staff Sergeant, your mission planning anticipates variables that our protocols don't address. How do you calculate success probability when facing this level of operational complexity? Zara's response reflected confidence earned through successful execution of missions that other operators had considered impossible. Sir, success probability depends on preparation, equipment capability, and operational execution, she said, her voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who had learned to trust her training and respect environmental limitations. Based on current intelligence, available equipment, and tactical requirements, I assess success probability at 85% for hostage rescue with minimal collateral damage. The number hung in the air like a beacon of hope for personnel who had been struggling with conventional capabilities that offered only 15% success probability. Zara's assessment represented the difference between an impossible mission and a challenging but achievable operation. General Blackwood, who had been observing the transformation of their operational capabilities, stepped forward with the recognition that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The hidden expert had not only revealed herself, but was demonstrating exactly the expertise that 37 American lives required. Staff Sergeant Nightingale, the general said, her voice reflecting both professional admiration and personal amazement at what she was witnessing, you've transformed an impossible mission into an achievable operation. Are you ready to prove that the Ghost can still live up to her reputation? Zara looked around the command center filled with personnel who now understood they were working with a legend, then back at the satellite imagery showing 37 Americans whose rescue depended on whether 12 years of civilian life had diminished skills that had once made her indispensable to military operations worldwide. General, she said, with the quiet confidence that had earned her legendary status, let's bring our people home.
At 20:32 hours, Staff Sergeant Zara Nightingale assumed control of the modified MQ-9 Reaper drone with the steady precision of someone stepping back into a role that had once defined her professional identity. The control station hummed with advanced technology that exceeded her previous equipment, but the fundamental principles of precision targeting remained constant across all platforms. 37 American lives were depending on whether the Ghost could execute the most challenging mission of her career. The satellite feeds streaming across multiple monitors painted a real-time picture of the target compound in Somalia, where thermal imaging revealed the precise locations of hostages, terrorists, and civilian populations in adjacent buildings. The tactical situation was even more complex than initial intelligence had indicated, with hostile forces positioned to maximize defensive coverage while using American civilians as human shields. Thermal signatures confirm 37 hostages distributed across 3 locations within the target structure, Captain Kane reported from her intelligence coordination station. Hostile count appears to be 12 individuals armed with automatic weapons and positioned to control all conventional access routes. Zara studied the building layout with the analytical intensity that had made her legendary during her active service years. The terrorists had chosen their positions with tactical sophistication that would defeat conventional rescue operations, but they had also created patterns that precision targeting could exploit if executed with surgical accuracy.
confirmed visual on hostile positions, she said, her voice carrying the calm professionalism of someone who had learned to manage stress through focus rather than emotion. Primary targets identified on floors 2 and 3, secondary defensive positions covering ground-level approaches. Window for simultaneous engagement is approximately 20 seconds before hostile forces can respond to initial strikes. Lieutenant Chambers monitored environmental conditions that would affect targeting precision, coordinating with meteorological services to provide real-time atmospheric data. Wind speed, air density, and thermal conditions all influence projectile trajectory in ways that required constant adjustment for accuracy measured in inches rather than feet. Environmental update shows crosswinds at target location increasing to 15 knots, thermal stratification creating turbulence between 3,000 and 5,000 feet, Chambers reported, targeting compensation required for atmospheric interference. Zara's hands moved over the control systems with muscle memory that transcended 12 years of civilian life, implementing compensation algorithms that accounted for every environmental factor affecting precision delivery. Her experience with surgical targeting had taught her to work within nature's constraints, rather than fighting atmospheric conditions that couldn't be controlled. Compensation calculated and applied, she confirmed, while adjusting targeting parameters with mathematical precision that reflected years of making life-or-death decisions based on incomplete information. Primary strike sequence programmed for simultaneous engagement, secondary targets designated for sequential elimination. The communication feeds crackled with coordination requirements spanning multiple continents and operational theaters. Ground forces positioned miles from the target zone, intelligence assets monitoring hostile communications, and command authority maintaining oversight of an operation that could influence international relations for decades. Ground forces report ready status for coordinated breach operations, Master Sergeant Jensen announced from his communication station. Special operations teams position for hostage extraction following precision targeting sequence. Coordination window confirmed for 15-second engagement protocol. General Blackwood monitored the overall operation with the focused attention of someone whose decisions had placed 37 American lives in the hands of a woman who had been serving coffee just hours earlier. The transformation from cafe manager to legendary operator was complete, but success would depend on whether 12 years of civilian life had preserved skills that conventional military training couldn't replicate. Staff Sergeant Nightingale, the general said, her voice carrying both confidence and the weight of command responsibility, you are authorized to engage when tactical conditions optimize success probability. 37 Americans are depending on your expertise. Zara felt the familiar calm that had always preceded her most challenging operations, the mental clarity that came from accepting responsibility for outcomes that couldn't be controlled, but could be influenced through preparation, skill, and unwavering focus on mission objectives rather than personal consequences.
Initiating final targeting sequence, she announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. Primary strikes programmed for simultaneous engagement, hostage locations confirmed clear of targeting zones, civilian populations in adjacent structures protected by precision parameter restrictions. The drone's sophisticated targeting systems locked onto hostile positions with accuracy that exceeded standard military capabilities. Zara's modifications had enhanced precision to surgical levels that would eliminate terrorist threats while preserving American hostages positioned mere meters from strike zones. Targets acquired. Firing solution confirmed, she reported, watching thermal imaging that showed hostile forces maintaining positions that would be eliminated within seconds. Environmental compensation applied, precision parameters verified, civilian protection protocols active. Technical Sergeant Pierce monitored equipment performance with growing amazement as Zara demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything he had witnessed during years of drone operations. Her integration of multiple targeting systems, environmental compensation, and real-time tactical adjustment reflected expertise that classroom training couldn't provide. "Ma'am, your targeting accuracy exceeds anything in our operational records," Pierce said, watching precision calculations that approached the theoretical limits of equipment capability. "How are you achieving coordination between multiple systems that our protocols treat as separate functions?" "Experience," Zara replied simply, while making final adjustments that would determine whether precision targeting could achieve what conventional military capabilities couldn't accomplish. When you've executed surgical strikes with American lives hanging in the balance, you learn integration techniques that standard training doesn't address. At 20:44 hours, with environmental conditions optimal and tactical timing synchronized across multiple operational elements, Zara initiated the precision strike sequence that would either rescue 37 Americans or demonstrate that some missions exceeded even legendary capabilities. Engaging primary targets, she announced, her fingers steady on controls that would unleash precisely calibrated destruction designed to eliminate hostile threats while preserving innocent lives. Strike sequence initiated. Impact in 15 seconds. The next 20 seconds would determine whether the Ghost could live up to her reputation when everything that mattered depended on skills that had been hidden behind a coffee counter for 12 years. 37 American lives, international implications, and the legend of precision targeting itself all hung in the balance as Zara Nightingale proved whether some expertise truly never faded, no matter how long it remained hidden.
The precision strikes impacted their targets at 20:44 hours and 23 seconds, with surgical accuracy that exceeded every parameter the mission planners had dared to hope for. Zara's modifications to the targeting systems delivered destruction so precisely calibrated that terrorist positions were eliminated while hostages located mere meters away remained completely unharmed. The Ghost had returned to prove that legendary expertise transcended time, circumstances, and 12 years of enforced civilian anonymity. Primary targets eliminated, Zara reported, her voice maintaining the calm professionalism that had carried her through the most challenging moments of the operation. Thermal imaging confirms hostile neutralization with 0 civilian casualties. Hostage locations remain secure and uncompromised. The command center erupted in controlled celebration as personnel recognized they were witnessing something extraordinary. An impossible mission had been transformed into flawless execution through expertise that conventional military training couldn't provide. 37 American lives had been preserved by precision that measured success in inches rather than acceptable losses. Captain Kane coordinated with ground forces who were now breaching the compound to extract hostages, whose rescue had seemed impossible just hours earlier. Ground teams report successful building entry, hostile resistance eliminated, hostages responding to extraction protocols. All 37 Americans confirmed alive and unharmed. The satellite feeds showed Special Operations Forces moving through the compound with efficiency that reflected perfect coordination between precision targeting and ground operations. Zara's strikes had eliminated defensive positions while preserving structural integrity that allowed safe hostage extraction from a building that could have become their tomb. Secondary strikes eliminated remaining hostile positions, Zara continued, monitoring feeds that confirmed complete mission success. Civilian populations in adjacent buildings report no casualties or structural damage. Precision parameters maintained throughout engagement sequence. Technical Sergeant Pierce stared at the targeting data with expressions that cycled through amazement and professional admiration. The accuracy Zara had achieved exceeded theoretical equipment capabilities, demonstrating integration techniques that would require complete revision of standard operational protocols. Staff Sergeant, Pierce said, reviewing precision measurements that documented surgical accuracy under impossible conditions. Your targeting achieved accuracy within 12 inches at maximum range while accounting for environmental interference that should have prevented this level of precision. These results exceed anything in our operational records. Lieutenant Chambers monitored communication feeds carrying updates from the extraction site, where hostages were being evacuated to safety by ground forces whose coordinated operations had been enabled by Zara's surgical elimination of hostile threats. The mission that had seemed impossible was now being completed with 0 American casualties. Hostage extraction proceeding according to protocol, Chambers reported. Medical evaluation indicates all 37 Americans are in stable condition. Several individuals requiring medical attention for dehydration and stress, but no serious injuries resulting from terrorist captivity or rescue operations.
Master Sergeant Jensen coordinated communication with Washington, where senior military leadership was monitoring an operation that would influence drone warfare protocols for decades. The successful hostage rescue demonstrated capabilities that would reshape precision targeting doctrine across all military services. Pentagon confirms mission success acknowledged at highest levels, Jensen announced. Congressional leadership and international allies are being briefed on operational results that exceeded all projected parameters. General Blackwood approached Zara's control station with the expression of someone witnessing history being made by expertise that had been hidden in plain sight for over a decade. The cafe manager had proven herself to be exactly the legendary operator that classified records had documented, demonstrating that true expertise transcended official status or current assignment. "Staff Sergeant Nightingale," the general said, her voice carrying both professional admiration and personal amazement at what she had witnessed. "What you accomplished today represents the finest precision targeting in military history. 37 Americans are alive because you were willing to step out of the shadows when your skills were needed most." Zara completed post-mission procedures with the systematic thoroughness that had characterized her entire operational approach, ensuring that equipment was properly secured and data was preserved for analysis that would improve future capabilities. The mission was complete, but the implications would influence military operations for years to come.
General, this mission succeeded because we had adequate intelligence, proper equipment, and coordination between multiple operational elements, she replied, deflecting personal recognition toward the team effort that had enabled success. Individual expertise matters, but mission success requires integration of all available resources. Colonel Hartwell reviewed mission documentation that would become required reading for precision targeting specialists throughout the military. The techniques Zara had demonstrated represented advancement in surgical warfare that could save countless lives in future operations requiring similar precision. "Staff Sergeant," Hartwell said, examining operational records that documented revolutionary approaches to precision targeting, "your modifications to standard protocols achieved results that our engineers said were impossible. How do you want to proceed with documenting these techniques for broader military application?" The question touched on implications that extended far beyond the current mission. Zara's expertise could transform precision targeting doctrine, but integration would require official recognition of capabilities that medical disqualification had supposedly eliminated from military service. As the immediate crisis resolution continued, personnel throughout the command center began understanding that they had witnessed more than successful hostage rescue. They had observed demonstration of expertise that challenged conventional understanding of what individual competence could achieve when properly supported and given opportunity to serve. The invisible expert had become undeniably visible, not through self-promotion or recognition-seeking, but through willingness to use her gifts when 37 American lives depended on capabilities that existed nowhere else. The ghost had returned to prove that legendary status was earned through service rather than official acknowledgement. "Ma'am," Technical Sergeant Pierce approached with equipment analysis that documented the revolutionary modifications Zara had implemented. "The enhancements you made to our targeting systems represent advancement that could benefit precision operations worldwide. Are you willing to share these techniques with our engineering teams?" Zara looked around the command center filled with personnel who now understood they had been working alongside someone whose expertise exceeded their combined training. Then back at satellite feeds showing 37 Americans being evacuated to safety because skills hidden behind a coffee counter had finally been allowed to serve their intended purpose. The mission was complete. The hostages were safe. The ghost had proven that some expertise never faded, regardless of how long it remained concealed. 3 weeks after the successful hostage rescue that had transformed Zara Nightingale from invisible cafe manager to legendary military operator, Ironwood Air Force Base began implementing changes that would influence precision targeting operations worldwide. The woman who had served coffee for 12 years now found herself at the center of a revolution in military doctrine that challenged conventional understanding of expertise, service, and the value of hidden capabilities. General Blackwood approached Zara in the newly established Precision Targeting Excellence Center, where advanced simulation equipment allowed operators to train using techniques that the Ghost had perfected through years of classified operations. The transformation of the former storage facility into a world-class training center reflected the military's recognition that Zara's expertise required institutional preservation. Staff Sergeant Nightingale, the general said, using the rank that had been permanently restored despite medical regulations that had once ended her career. The Pentagon wants to establish a comprehensive training program based on your operational methods. They're requesting that you lead development of precision targeting doctrine that will be implemented across all military services. Zara considered the proposal while observing Lieutenant Chambers and Technical Sergeant Pierce practicing modifications to targeting systems that she had developed during her active service years. The opportunity to share expertise that could save lives in future operations was compelling, but she had also learned to value different forms of service during her civilian years. General, I'd like to propose something that honors both my military expertise and the community service that sustained me during my civilian years, she said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had characterized her approach to both coffee service and precision targeting. Part-time training instructor and operational consultant, part-time community liaison. The cafe served purposes that pure military efficiency couldn't replicate. The solutions Zara proposed reflected wisdom gained through 12 years of learning that service took many forms, all of them valuable when performed with competence and dedication. She would return to precision targeting, but on terms that honored both her military expertise and her commitment to the base community that had unknowingly supported her during years of enforced anonymity. Captain Kane approached with documentation that revealed the international implications of Zara's successful hostage rescue. Intelligence services from allied nations were requesting access to training programs that could replicate techniques demonstrated during the Somalia operation. The Ghost's reputation had spread throughout global military communities. Staff Sergeant, Kane said, presenting briefing materials that outlined international cooperation requests. NATO allies want to send their precision targeting specialists here for training based on your operational methods. The techniques you demonstrated represent advancement that could influence military operations worldwide. The recognition was gratifying, but Zara understood that true expertise was measured by practical application rather than official acknowledgement. Her success in Somalia had been possible because skills developed during classified operations had been preserved through years of civilian service that maintained mental discipline and analytical capabilities. Captain, the most important aspect of any training program is ensuring that techniques are adapted to individual capabilities rather than attempting to replicate specific approaches, Zara replied, drawing on experience that had taught her the difference between technical proficiency and operational wisdom. What worked for me succeeded because it built on years of experience that each operator must develop through their own service. Master Sergeant Jensen coordinated logistics for the expanded training program that would accommodate international participants while maintaining operational security required for classified techniques. The administrative challenges were complex, but the potential benefits of sharing Zara's expertise justified resources that the military was allocating to the program. Staff Sergeant, Jensen said, reviewing coordination requirements that would bring precision targeting specialists from multiple nations to Ironwood Air Force Base. The scope of this training program exceeds anything we've implemented previously. Are you prepared to work with operators whose experience and training backgrounds differ significantly from American military doctrine? Zara's response reflected understanding gained through years of serving coffee to personnel from diverse backgrounds and experience levels. Effective instruction required adaptation to individual learning styles rather than standardized approaches that assume uniform capability. Sergeant, competence transcends national boundaries and service traditions, she said, while reviewing curricula that would address fundamental principles rather than specific technical procedures. The goal is developing capabilities that save lives, regardless of which flag operators serve under.
Technical Sergeant Pierce approached with equipment analysis that documented revolutionary improvements in targeting accuracy, achieved through modifications that Zara had implemented. The engineering specifications would influence drone design for decades, representing advancement that private contractors were struggling to replicate. "Ma'am," Pierce said, presenting technical documentation that outlined precision enhancements achieved through integration techniques that exceeded standard engineering approaches. Defense contractors are requesting access to your modification specifications. The improvements you implemented represent commercial value that could influence military equipment development. The question touched on implications that extended beyond military service toward broader technological advancement. Zara's expertise could influence civilian applications of precision technology, but such development would require balancing operational security with beneficial innovation. "Sergeant, any technical sharing must prioritize operational effectiveness over commercial considerations," she replied, recognizing that her innovations could benefit both military operations and civilian applications when properly managed. The goal is improving capabilities that serve national security, rather than generating profit from techniques developed through taxpayer-funded service. As weeks passed, the integration of Zara's dual roles created something unique at Ironwood Air Force Base. The Precision Targeting Excellence Center became a gathering place where technical expertise was shared alongside community support, where international cooperation flourished alongside local service, and where recognition of competence transcended official status or assignment. The early morning ritual continued at Compass Rose Café, where Zara still prepared coffee for personnel who now understood they were being served by someone whose expertise had saved 37 American lives. But the conversations had evolved to include tactical discussions, training coordination, and mentorship opportunities that bridged military service with community development. Lieutenant Chambers said one morning while accepting his perfectly prepared coffee, "Having you here has changed how everyone thinks about service and competence. We've learned that excellence often exists in unexpected places, waiting for the right moment to emerge." Zara smiled with the expression of someone who had found peace with her own complexity, recognizing that both versions of her identity had value that could serve purposes larger than individual recognition or career advancement. "Excellence isn't about individual achievement," she replied, handing him coffee prepared with the same precision she brought to targeting calculations. "It's about creating environments where other people can discover and develop their own capabilities."
1 year after the Somalia hostage rescue that had transformed Staff Sergeant Zara Nightingale from invisible cafe manager to legendary precision targeting instructor, the impact of her revelation continued to influence military operations worldwide. The Precision Targeting Excellence Center at Ironwood Air Force Base had become the premier training facility for surgical warfare specialists, but more importantly, it had demonstrated that exceptional expertise often existed in unexpected places, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge and serve. The morning sun painted the base in familiar shades of amber and gold as Zara unlocked the doors of Compass Rose Café at precisely 0500 hours, maintaining the routine that had sustained her through 12 years of civilian anonymity. But now the early morning ritual carried additional purpose, serving as an informal mentoring center where experienced personnel shared knowledge with newcomers, where technical expertise was valued regardless of rank or position, and where conversations flowed as smoothly as perfectly brewed coffee. General Blackwood approached the counter as she had for years, but their interaction now reflected mutual respect between professionals who understood that service took many forms, all of them valuable when performed with competence and dedication. The general's morning coffee remained exactly the same: black, single-origin Ethiopian, served at 160 degrees in a ceramic mug. But their conversations had evolved to encompass strategic planning that influenced military doctrine globally. "Zara," the general said, accepting her coffee with the grateful recognition of someone who appreciated consistency in an unpredictable profession, "the international training program you've developed has exceeded every projection we made. NATO allies are reporting precision improvements that they attributed directly to techniques learned here.
The recognition was satisfying, but Zara understood that true success was measured by capabilities that saved lives rather than official acknowledgments or career advancement. Her integration of coffee service with precision targeting instruction had created something unique that served purposes neither role could accomplish independently. General, the most important aspect of any training program is ensuring that operators understand the responsibility that comes with exceptional capabilities, she replied, preparing orders for arriving personnel that represented the diverse community that had unknowingly supported her during years of enforced civilian service. Technical proficiency matters, but wisdom comes from understanding that expertise exists to serve something larger than individual achievement. General Kane entered the cafe carrying reports that documented the global impact of training programs based on Zara's operational methods. Precision targeting specialists from 17 nations had completed certification courses that were already influencing military operations in regions where surgical accuracy could mean the difference between mission success and international incident. Staff Sergeant, Kane said, reviewing documentation that outlines successful operations conducted using techniques developed at the Excellence Center. Intelligence reports indicate that training based on your methods has prevented civilian casualties in 6 different international operations. The precision doctrine you've established is saving lives worldwide. The information represented exactly the kind of meaningful impact that had motivated Zara's decision to reveal her hidden expertise when 37 American lives depended on capabilities that existed nowhere else in available military resources. Her willingness to sacrifice comfortable anonymity had created ripple effects that continue expanding across global military communities. General, the real success belongs to operators who have adapted these techniques to their own service contexts, Zara said, while serving coffee to Technical Sergeant Pierce, who had become one of the center's most effective instructors. Individual expertise matters only when it enables others to develop their own exceptional capabilities. Lieutenant Chambers approached with the confident bearing of someone who had been transformed by exposure to expertise that exceeded standard military training. His precision targeting skills had improved dramatically through instruction that emphasized understanding over procedure, principle over protocol. "Ma'am," Chambers said, accepting coffee prepared exactly as he preferred while reviewing training schedules that would bring the next group of international specialists to the center. "The operators completing your program consistently report that the experience changed their approach to service, not just technical capability. What do you attribute that transformation to?" Zara paused in her preparation routine to consider the lieutenant's question with the thoroughness she applied to all important analyses. The training program had succeeded because it addressed fundamental principles that transcended specific technical procedures, focusing on the development of judgment that could adapt to any operational context.
Lieutenant, technical proficiency can be taught through standard instruction, but wisdom comes from understanding that your capabilities exist to serve others, she replied, while observing personnel throughout the cafe engaged in conversations that bridged military service with community development. When operators understand that their expertise has meaning beyond personal achievement, they develop judgment that transforms competence into excellence. Master Sergeant Jensen coordinated logistics for expansion of the training program that would accommodate growing international demand while maintaining operational security required for classified techniques. The administrative success reflected broader recognition that Zara's approach to instruction was producing results that conventional military education couldn't replicate. Staff Sergeant, Jensen said, reviewing coordination requirements that would establish similar training centers at Allied installations worldwide. The Pentagon wants to expand this program to multiple locations using your curriculum and instructional methods. Are you prepared to train the instructors who would replicate your approach internationally? The question represented the ultimate validation of expertise that had been hidden behind a coffee counter for 12 years. But Zara understood that true legacy was measured by capabilities that continued developing long after individual contribution ended. Her willingness to share knowledge would create educational networks that could influence military service for decades.
Sergeant, the goal was never building recognition for individual expertise, but creating systems that develop excellence in others, she replied, recognizing that her most important contribution might be enabling other instructors to surpass her own capabilities. Success will be measured by whether future operators develop skills that exceed what any individual instructor could provide. As the day progressed, with its familiar rhythm of coffee service integrated with precision targeting instruction, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her from commercial airline operations to classified military service, to civilian anonymity, to legendary recognition. Each phase had taught essential lessons about the relationship between individual capability and community contribution, between personal achievement and service to others. The invisible expert had become undeniably visible, not through self-promotion or recognition-seeking, but through willingness to use her gifts when they were needed most. In that willingness, she had discovered something more valuable than career advancement or official acknowledgement: the satisfaction that came from enabling others to develop their own exceptional capabilities and find their own ways to serve with distinction, humility, and unwavering competence. The woman who had served coffee had become an instructor who saved lives, but more importantly, she had created a legacy that would continue developing long after her individual service ended, ensuring that excellence would always find a way to emerge when circumstances demanded the very best that human capability could provide. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.